Hey guys, hope everyone's doing well. I wanted to record this video just to go through some of the major polling data that's come out in the past few days regarding some of the key events that have happened since Joe Biden's inauguration back on January 20th, and also talk about some issues regarding Liz Cheney, Marjorie Taylor Greene, COVID, and a few other issues that have been polled. So yeah, I'm going to focus on, I generally get my polling data and aggregators from either 538 or Real Clear Politics. I think both do a pretty good job. 538, they tend to adjust the polls to kind of even it out, make it, a little bit smoother, at least in terms of like graphical representation of the data. And they also do like a weighting based on grades that they assign to various pollsters. You can see here like Quinnipiac is B plus, YouGov is a B. So I'm gonna focus on on Real Clear Politics today. Looking here, they just recently put in their poll average graph now that they have like enough data to go off and actually make like a trend line. But you see here that you got Joe Biden, an average approval rating of about 55 to 39%, for a roughly 16% net approval rating, which is, not great for a president enjoying his quote unquote honeymoon part of his presidency. But it's also not too bad considering that President Trump did not enjoy a net positive approval rating at any point of his presidency. And in today's pretty polarized political and media environment, seeing a net rating of about plus 16 isn't the worst thing. I expect that to kind of compress over time. Probably give it another month, and it wouldn't surprise me to see some of those numbers kind of compress to maybe a net plus, if I had to guess, around +5, kind of settling into around 50% approval, 45% disapproval, as you kind of see, I'd say like further consolidation of the, Democrats in favor, Republicans against Joe Biden, and independents obviously falling somewhere in between. And because as you can kind of see here, based on like the spreads, and they also happen to be some of the more recent polling data, I'm going to focus on the latest Quinnipiac all adults poll and the Economist YouGov poll of registered voters. Economist YouGov puts out their poll, I believe, every Wednesday, so kind of gives like a good place to track in. They're relatively middle of the road in terms of the outcome. You can see here everything from Rasmussen has Biden up +3 net approval to Politico Morning Consult that has +29. The reality is it's probably somewhere in between for that true value of like where the country currently stands. So I'm going to go into like a little bit more detail on Quinnipiac to start off with. You can see like just on like the top lines here that people are approving of President Biden's handling of coronavirus. The partisan divides with regards to his overall job approval, pretty clear. Democrats almost universal approval, +89-point margin. Independents pretty solid at 16-point net approval. And among Republicans, considering where we've been, when you looked at Democratic opposition to Trump, an 82 to 11% margin, not great for Joe Biden among Republicans, but also maybe not as bad as you may think. So, like they mentioned, it's nearly the inverse of President Trump's -38 to 55% job approval at the same point of his presidency back in February 2017. And, I'm going to go, they kind of cover some of these, for anyone who wants to look it up and read for yourself, some of the headline numbers, but I'm going to go straight to the crosstabs to talk a little bit more about, some polling nuggets that are kind of interesting, because I think a lot of the action is, while you can often use like crosstabs to kind of justify or disprove a point. I do think that, they do kind of give you a little bit more color. So, kind of key here, looking at like the Republican Party, do you view them more favorably or less favorably? 11% to 50%, versus 17% to 35% for Democrats. So not really a great picture for either party in terms of the more favorable, less favorable. Granted, solid portions view them about the same, but definitely not great if you are, a leader in the Republican Party to see that those types of numbers. Even amongst Republicans, it's tough to see if this is really from like the pro-Trump faction or the anti-never Trump faction that it views it less favorably. But, a 32-24 split in favor, not great either when you're a member of your own party. Meanwhile, you can see for Democrats, right, 43 to 3%, So you can clearly see the divides there. When you look at the opinion of Liz Cheney versus Marjorie Taylor Greene, you see nationally, Liz Cheney's doing pretty good. She, granted, I would doubt that a majority of Democrats would vote for her if she was running in their local race, but you can see a kind of national positive 8-point margin split nationally among all groups, but amongst Republicans, she's underwater 7 to 36%. So that's not great. Meanwhile, she enjoys a much higher favorable rating among Democrats and, again, in between with independents. Kind of on the flip side of that coin, you have Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is deeply underwater nationally, rightfully so, in my opinion, given her past statements and past support for conspiracy theories, even if today she claims to disavow them. You can see here that 9 to 38, pretty bad. She does split Republicans 17 to 20 in terms of favorability, which is much better than Liz Cheney's numbers, which kind of goes and speaks to the divide and the hold that former President Trump still has over the Republican Party, for better or worse, in my opinion, for the worse. But when you look here at whose views do you think are more representative of the Republican Party today, Cheney's or Greene's, you see a slight majority in favor of Greene, and that kind of holds across all different political groups with the exception of independents. And it does go to speak of still the divide. I will say, like, unfortunately, I feel like the bulk of Republican leaders, unfortunately, probably are right now aligning a little bit closer to Greene, for that matter. I would definitely personally align much closer to Cheney, but truth of the matter is that Greene is a unequivocal supporter of Donald Trump, and right now that appears to be in many ways a litmus test for most Republican politicians out there. Looking ahead, who would you like to see a bigger role in the Republican Party? Pretty clear on a national level, people want Cheney. Even Democrats who, frankly, I think would be better served by seeing the party move to more of a Greene's direction, because frankly, it would leave the Republican Party as a, effectively a rump party, unable to gather a large, a large portion of support in the country. But, among Republicans, largely split in favor slightly of Greene. And again, that goes to speak about Donald Trump's hold on the Republican Party. When you see about the approving or disapproving the removal of Greene from her committee assignments, again, pretty solid majority, net 14-point support nationally in favor of that. However, amongst Republicans, pretty decisively in favor of disapproving, which I think is unfortunate. But one of the main points of solace I get from this poll is that when you look here, Is the belief in conspiracy theories in the United States under control or out of control? Vast majority of the country says out of control. Vast majority, to a lesser extent, but still a vast majority of Republicans say that it is out of control. And well, I would say that both for that and then the next bit here, do you think that words of politicians can pose a danger to Americans? Maybe Republicans see it in a kind of a different light, coming from, they see maybe the words of Democratic politicians being a danger to Americans and not see Donald Trump's. But it's good to see at least some level of agreement that there is a problem with regards to violent political speech. I would say particularly by the former president and his role on the rioting and insurrection of January 6th. But yeah, so there's some polling. I'm just going through the Quinnipiac poll, kind of going to the Economist poll here. I think it's interesting because they go into some more other figures here. I saw like the support for AOC largely split, in terms of the very favorable and somewhat favorables versus the somewhat unfavorables and very unfavorables. She's split basically at a -2 net favorable opinion, which isn't terrible, isn't bad, I would say. Bernie Sanders has a, roughly a +7, and Joe Manchin, relatively unknown, nationally speaking, but, again, relatively neutral political figures. Then when you kind of get a little bit further down this list and start taking a look at Ted Cruz, you can see he's pretty far underwater, 34 to 46. Definitely not a good favorability rating to start off with if you're trying to win a national presidential election in 2024. Even amongst Republicans, you see here 68 to 15%. Solid support, I would say, but definitely a sizable discontent from members of his own party. And those numbers are largely reflecting in Josh Hawley's numbers as well. 22% in favor, 36 against. He's obviously a little bit of a little bit more of a newcomer to the political stage, so less familiar nationally, but kind of see the same breakdown. A little bit worse within the party relative to Ted Cruz, looking at 44 to 16 in favor of him amongst Republicans. Good numbers perhaps entering being relatively unknown and entering a primary, but it's not anything great. Truly stands out, I would say. And, I won't go through the same points. The results of the Economist YouGov poll largely reflect the Quinnipiac poll with regards to Liz Cheney and Marjorie Taylor Greene. What I kind of like a little bit more about this is that it does separate out the very and somewhat favorable or unfavorable ratings. Just kind of get like a little bit more of a nuanced view, right? Which I think is good because people will. I often think that with MGT, sometimes her support amongst Republicans is like a little bit overstated. My theory for that is that when you're kind of pitted up against, still here with a nuanced view, you see 35 to 24%. But I do think that some of that, like when you see here the somewhat favorable category, that may be coming from the people that say, well, I don't like her theories on conspiracy theories. I don't like what she has to say, but I'm also saying that she's getting a lot of flack from the Democrats and the, maybe some more left-leaning political networks and social media. And since I don't like them, maybe I'm going to just say I approve of her on these types of polls without necessarily approving explicitly what she stands for. That's just one of my theories. I don't know if it's true. It's tough to really back that up with data, but just wanted to throw that out there. Some of the other polling nuggets that I thought was interesting, I'm just going to touch on two. Mitch McConnell, deeply underwater. He doesn't really have support on either a national level or within the party. 19% in favor, 64% against. Within the Republican Party, 33% in favor, 53% against, with 30% being very unfavorable. I personally, again, I've mentioned I kind of fall on the libertarian conservative side of the political spectrum, tend to be considered more quote unquote establishment Republican. And as a result, I think that Mitch McConnell often, I think he's an expert politician, pretty well versed and kind of has, I think, demonstrated his acumen with regards to politics. I'm not necessarily his biggest fan. I also think he gets a little bit worse of a rap than he deserves. But just to throw that out there on my own personal viewpoint. And the last little bit that I wanted to highlight here, because I thought it was very interesting, was right here at the end. I'm going to see if I can pull it up for you all. It's this jobs in 6 months, because I honestly think that it's a little bit devoid of the actual reality and like a little bit overly pessimistic. And I'm a little discouraged to see that our fellow Americans are, kind of have this negative viewpoint on how the economy is going to look like as it recovers, hopefully, from the COVID crisis. But, you see 29% think that there'll be more jobs, 20% the same amount of jobs, 31% fewer jobs, 20% not sure. So net, net 2% think that there will be fewer jobs. And, you see this again, unfortunately, due to our political polarization divides. You see this largely coming from Republicans. I haven't taken a look, but I'm sure that if you looked at this same poll from before the election, and maybe even right after when President Trump was, these numbers right here would be inverse. It would be, vast majority of Republicans thinks there'll be more jobs. Vast majority of Democrats will say that there'll be less jobs. Again, I'd have to take a look at that, but that's just my intuition. You see these kind of like direction of the country numbers, anticipation, and like improvements with X issue basically flip over in support depending on which party is in power. Again, like I am a registered Republican. I personally think that there are going to be many more jobs. Frankly, no matter what, provided that the vaccine distribution continues, there is very little that I would say Joe Biden, even if he wanted to, by raising taxes through the roof and putting in like employment tax, raising Social Security taxes super high, absent something really out of left field like that, the job market is going to recover. We are going to have more jobs come August 17th than we do today on February 17th, just by nature of the COVID pandemic kind of receding and things getting more back to normal without economic stimulus, without tax breaks, without stimulus checks. The economy will recover, and more jobs, millions of more jobs will be created between now and then. And that's going to happen regardless of who's in charge. And it's going to happen, I would say, almost absent some, extreme variation, extreme variant that may arise in the future. We're going to see this play out across the world, across developed economies, across emerging economies, just because that's the nature of a severe economic shock like COVID is. You have a severe drop of employment due to the lockdowns and the general discouragement of consumer demand due to restrictions, and also people are just scared. As people get vaccinated and as they're confident about their safety, they're going to go out, they're going to start spending, they're going to start traveling, going on vacations. Businesses are going to start opening, their offices. It's going to allow restaurants and, financial districts around the country, commercial districts around the country to reopen. And that's just how it's going to play out. So I'm like highly confident. I wish that people would be like a little bit more optimistic and a little bit less polarized. But I do think that we should all be confident that we will have more jobs, not less, than today. So those are just, I'd highly encourage you guys to. I love looking up polls and reading some of their content. So I would highly encourage you guys to take a look at them for yourselves, as well as some of the other polls that have been released that are on 538's Real Clear Politics websites, as well as whatever other polling sites you may rely on. Definitely check them out, because it's always interesting to see where our country and where specific demographic groups and political coalitions kind of stand on how they view the events of the day. So anyways, that's going to be it for this video. Thank you guys for listening. Any thoughts, comments, suggestions, please feel free to send them my way, and hope everyone stays safe and healthy. Have a good one. Bye.